my partners, my friends, good afternoon. I want to thank Haaretz and the organizers of this conference. Thank you for giving us this space, and thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, another such victory, and we are lost. Those were the words of King Pyrrhus after his battle with the Romans. With that sentence, King Pyrrhus named the kind of victory that is really a defeat, a Pyrrhic victory. 2 years after October 7, Israel is facing its own Pyrrhic moment. Yes, every hostage return is a victory. Every child and every family who survived Gaza is a victory. But that is not the victory Netanyahu wanted, and not the one his criminal government has been fighting for. The government promised total victory, strength, control, but what has truly been achieved and at what price? Entire cities in Gaza have been erased from the map. Tens of thousands of Palestinians, including at least 20,000 children, have been killed. Hundreds of thousands have been left without homes. Universities, hospitals, culture institutions, all reduced to rubble. This is not a victory. This is devastation. And still, the political reality remains. Between the river and the sea, there are two peoples, 7.5 million Palestinians and 7.5 million Jews, bound by geography and by destiny. Neither will disappear, neither will vanish. The Israeli government claimed it wanted to encourage Gazans to leave. In reality, a forced transfer, promoted by Netanyahu and backed by Trump as voluntary relocation. They failed. Israel aimed not just to destroy Hamas, but to erase the Palestinian cause. That failed too. Today, Israel's diplomatic position is shattered. Even its closest allies speak of accountability. Netanyahu and others face the International Criminal Court for war crimes. And one thing is clear, as the Bible reminds us, justice, justice you shall pursue. Those responsible for these crimes against humanity must be held accountable. They must face justice. Every last one of them, tzedek, tzedek terdof, justice, justice you shall pursue. Dear friends, after all the destruction, Israel remains locked in the cage it built for itself: fear, occupation, domination. Its policies have failed, including the most basic, ensuring a safe life for everyone who calls our shared homeland home. The Israeli state was already like Sparta. Now it has become a super Sparta. So I ask you, my friends, if this is victory, what does defeat look like? After all this bloodshed, after all this destruction, the geopolitical situation remains frozen, trapped in the same endless cycle of bloodshed. The Palestinian people have faced horrors beyond words, yet they have not been defeated. People who survived exile, dispossession, and occupation will not vanish. Every act of destruction only shows the strength of what cannot be destroyed, the will to live in dignity. Even this comes at a great cost. If a people bleeds and cities lie in ruins, what kind of victory is that? If Palestinians in the West Bank are being ethnically cleansed, expelled from their lands, what kind of victory is that? The strength of the Palestinian cause, the sumud, has been shown to the world, but at the price no nation, no people should ever be forced to pay. Even the oppressed can suffer a Pyrrhic victory when their suffering is the only proof of their existence. And still, despite the systematic destruction and deliberate killings, one truth remains. You cannot bomb a people out of existence. You can starve them. You can starve them, demolish their homes, silence their voices, persecute and kill them, but you cannot erase the truth of their cause. My friends, the world has changed. The horrors of the 20th century, massacres, genocides, ethnic cleansing must never be allowed again. We cannot claim to have learned if we watch in silence. Humanity cannot remain silent. Berlin carries the scars of the 20th century. It stands as a living reminder of how far human cruelty can go when power is absolute, when racism is normalized, and when entire peoples are dehumanized. But a city like Berlin can be both a graveyard of history and still become a home for culture, resistance, and rebirth. That a place once divided by walls can become a symbol of openness, dialogue, and moral responsibility. But Berlin teaches us something else as well. Silence in the face of injustice is deadly. It was silence that let fascism rise. It was silence that made the greatest crime of the century possible. And yet, today we see silence return. Dressed up in diplomatic language, governments speak of concern. That host conference, they issue statements, but when it comes to ending occupation, ending apartheid, ending injustice, they choose silence. They make a desert and call it peace. Just a few months ago, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said that Israel is doing a dirty work for all of us. These are not the words of someone committed to justice. These are the words of someone outsourcing injustice and pretending to stay clean. Let the truth be clear. Europe as a whole has failed to hold the Israeli government accountable. The United States continues to send millions protecting Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, and Smotrich from the consequences of their criminal actions. And let me be clear. You speak of democracy, of Western values, yet you support injustice, occupation, and supremacy. Wars without action are betrayal. Silence in the face of oppression is betrayal. I am here to say it clearly. Silence can no longer be an option. My friends, it is no secret. Anyone who truly knows me knows that one of my political inspirations is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But recently, I was reminded of another figure who stood on that same stage at the historic 1963 March on Washington, Rabbi Joachim Prinz, a rabbi from Berlin who was expelled by the Nazi regime in 1937 for refusing to remain silent in the face of injustice. Moments before Dr. King delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech, Rabbi Prinz took the podium. He spoke as someone who has witnessed the rise of fascism and as a human being who understood that silence in the face of oppression is itself a crime. He said, I was the rabbi of a Jewish community in Berlin under the Hitler regime. I learned many things. The most important thing that I learned in my life is that bigotry and hatred are not the most urgent problems. The most urgent, the most disgraceful, the most shameful, and the most tragic problem is silence. A great people which has created a great civilization has become a nation of silent outlookers. They remain silent in the face of hate, in the face of brutality, and in the face of mass murder. Reading those words today, I feel their weight on our reality here in Berlin and on our shared homeland. Once again, there is a terrible silence. Silence as Gaza was completely destroyed. Entire cities and neighborhoods erased, children buried under the rubble of homes and schools. Silence as if 70,000 lives, 20,000 of them children, are nothing more than numbers, collateral damage, or military targets. Silence in the face of state terrorism in the West Bank, where armed settlers attack innocent Palestinian civilians, where hundreds are uprooted from their cities and villages, where the army protects the attackers and criminalizes the victims. Silence as if occupation could be called security. My friends, silence is not neutral. Silence is a choice. Martin Luther King said that in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And I say today, if we are truly friends, we must not be silent. Not as Palestinians, not as Jews, not as Germans, and not as human beings. Because the struggle for peace, justice, and equality is a single struggle fought of many fronts, and every voice raised against one injustice gives strength to resist the next. In 2018, the late Professor Zeev Sternhell, a Holocaust survivor, wrote an article in Haaretz about the rise of fascism in Israel. He warned that what was emerging was not just a form of Israeli fascism. It was a kind of racism that reminded him of the early days of Nazism. He pointed to the nation-state law, recently passed at the time, as only the beginning. Sternhell explained that, like any ideology, German racism evolved over time. At first, it targeted only the human and civic rights of Jews. He suggested that without the outbreak of the Second World War, the so-called Jewish problem might have resulted in the voluntary immigration of Jews from German-controlled territories. Even back then, he wrote that some people on the political right might have imagined a similar fate for the Palestinians. I remember visiting Professor Sternhell that very night after the article was published. I will never forget that visit. We spoke about the achievements of Arab citizens in universities, hospitals, and in the high-tech sector. He led me to his library and showed me a book under the title, The Jews in Germany. In this introduction, I read that in 1930, Jews were just 0.5% of Berlin's population, yet 30% of its doctors. They held leadership positions in hospitals, universities, and banks. And yet, we all know what came a decade later. He asked me, did that make a difference for them? His words were chilling. I remember Professor Sternhell saying, in an undemocratic environment, even the professional and economic success of a minority can make it more exposed, more attacked, and more persecuted. He looked me in the eye and asked, was success enough on its own? The answer he worded is no. A minority cannot survive on individual achievement alone. Not in an undemocratic environment that denies rights and equality. That is why a minority must be part of the struggle for democracy itself. Because without a strong, vibrant democracy, one that protects every citizen, every community, history will repeat itself. Now, let us speak honestly about reality. There will be no more managing the conflict. As Netanyahu long promised, it is clear that annihilation cannot bring security and occupation cannot bring peace. The Palestinian people's basic needs and aspirations have not vanished. They are now at the center of global debate in universities and on streets worldwide, from Berlin to New York, Rome, Paris, Amsterdam, and London. Everywhere, Palestine has become a central issue. After 2 years of a genocidal campaign, the world's sympathy has shifted toward the Palestinian people. Nearly 90% of the world's countries now recognize the state of Palestine, including the United Kingdom and France, except for Germany. By the way, that was my only request to the United States when Donald Trump came last month to address the Knesset. So I ask you to, Germany, recognize Palestine. Yes, recognize Palestine. Recognize that there are two peoples. There are two peoples in our shared homeland, both with the right to self-determination. The Israeli government isolates itself further by refusing to see what the whole world sees. There can be no future built on supremacy, only on equality, and this is the only path forward. Dear friends, the lesson of Pyrrhic victory is not military, but moral. You cannot destroy your neighbor without destroying yourself. You cannot build a future on the graves of children. What we need today is a permanent agreement, not just the absence of bombs, but the start of a new political horizon. It must include an end to the occupation and the blockade of Gaza and the establishment of two states that can live side by side, not in fear, but in peace. A comprehensive political agreement must recognize a simple human truth. The history of the past century has shown that two peoples are bound to this land, Israelis and Palestinians, Palestinians and Israelis, two peoples, one destiny, whether we like it or not. There is no military solution. There never was and there never will be. Nothing, absolutely nothing, can change the fact that 7.5 million Jews and 7.5 million Palestinians live between the river and the sea. They have tried everything: war, occupation, walls, siege, negotiation, even extermination. And they keep trying every day in many different ways. And this reality will not change. Because here we will stay. Here we will stay in Lydda, in Ramli, and in the Galilee. هنا باقون في اللد, في الرملة, في الجليل. The only way forward is through peace, justice, and Jewish-Arab partnership. We need a political solution that is honest, brave, and rooted in trust between the two peoples. Because both peoples have the right to live in our shared homeland in freedom and equality. But this path will not be easy. It demands moral courage. The courage not to kill, but to transform. Not to destroy, but to build. It is always easier to fight the other side than the confront the extremism within one's own people. Yet it is precisely that courage that our shared future requires. History is offering us a choice. Either this holy land, baptized in blood, continues down the path of endless victories, or we begin the long, painful work of liberation, not only of Palestinians from occupation, but of Israelis from the tyranny of their own domination. We don't seek another Pyrrhic victory. We don't need another Pyrrhic victory. We seek a real victory, one that restores life, recognizes the rights of both peoples in the occupation, and establishes a free and independent state of Palestine alongside Israel. Only such a victory can redeem this land from endless bloodshed, so that both peoples may at last live, rejoice, and know the peace and safety every human being deserves. And we know we shall win. We shall win. Thank you very much.